Hey, Christina, it's Mike. Thanks so much for reaching out to me. I am really excited to do a video critique here of your work. We've got the fruit bowl we'll talk about and this interior space. But first, I wanted to answer a couple questions that you had. And I don't know if you already know these answers, so if you do, please fast forward through this part. But I wanted to mention about linear workflow and AOVs. So linear workflow is a way of working where you so basically when you're looking at this image on your screen, you're dealing with sRGB space, and that is slightly different than what the image actually is. Like, it's just a representation of that file in the data. It's a little bit the values are a little bit crushed. It's just not ideal for a VFX workflow. So what we've developed is a linear workflow, which is getting the most data and range of values from 0 to 1 or beyond in the image. And it's done by adding like a gamma shift or a linear workflow node to all of your shaders, to your output files, to basically any image that you're processing, working with, or outputting. And what it does is it's just a way of working that allows us to get the most value out of our image, the most numeric data value out of the image. It's a little hard to explain. It's a little hard to visualize because you're visualizing it on computer screens, and that's never really a good way to do it because it's what you're fighting against. You'll notice a linear workflow on a screen because the values look very lifted, and then eventually at the very end, when you're compositing it, the values come back into line. It's just a way of working. And then the other one is AOVs. So AOVs are, this is a little Mr. Bean test that I have, I downloaded from the RenderMan site, and I've just been playing with the last few days. So basically we have this image with just like one light flashing across his face. And the way that it works is normally you have this one beauty render. And in our classes, we'll show you how to do this in Arnold, and I'm also setting stuff up, like I said, for RenderMan. And basically what you want to do is that in your one outputted EXR file, you want to embed AOVs, arbitrary output variables. You don't need to remember that name. It's just a way of embedding different, breaking up the image into different areas. So like normally we would have to render out a different diffuse pass and different specular pass. But with AOVs, you can do it all within one file. As you can see here in Nuke, I don't have a bunch of stuff loaded in. This is the specular. We got indirect diffuse. We've got indirect specular. We've got all the subsurface values. And then, of course, we have the beauty as well. And you can break out any number of files. Like normally, like a TIFF file or a Targa file will have channels for red, green, blue, and alpha. EXR files, you can embed any amount of layers into it. So like I said, in this, we're doing, we like this file has this many channels in it. It's a ton. So, and seemingly unlimited the number of channels you can add to an EXR file. So that's basically all AOVs are and all linear workflow is. Why a company would ask you that in an interview, I'm not 100% sure, because as you can see, it takes 5 minutes to explain, and each company will have their own, probably have their own workflows for this stuff. So that stuff drives me crazy sometimes because it has nothing to do with what makes you a good artist. What does make you a good artist is and makes you a successful lighting artist is making beautiful images. So we'll talk about that now. So we always say that the three things that make up any well-lit image are creating emotion, directing the viewer's eye, and creating visual shaping. This is because as a lighting artist, you're telling a story the way that an animator would or anybody else working on a film. Your goal is to make your craft in a way that helps tell the story. So of course we want to set the mood first. We want to, if the scene is very happy, we want it to be light and glowy. If it's very dramatic, we want it to feel that way. Visual shaping, we want to, this is a visual trick that we're doing here. We've got 2D space, and we're trying to 2D image, and we're trying to simulate 3D space. So we want to create areas of light and dark off fall off. Let me pull this up. So like something like this, you've got these flat walls, but you can see there's variation as we go down them here. And you want to be able to feel that, things like just variation across these values around rounded objects. We'll talk about that a lot with character lighting. And then directing the viewer's eye. You want to make the character the brightest part of the image so he or she pops off over the background. This is a good example too of popping off warm values over cool values and just doing that. So to get into your images a little bit, you are exactly where we want TDU students when they're first starting. It's because you know how to make lights, you know how to light a scene, right? You know how to create lights, you know how to render, you know how to do all the hows of lighting, how to create this, how to do that. It's just now we need to get into the whys. Like, what's our motivation? What's the story we're trying to tell? How do we make it look better? How do we make it feel like a better image? Which I guess are hows, but you get the point. So with these, I think that you're off to a great start, but I think they need direction. We'll start. We'll actually start with this one here. So with this interior scene, the first question is, what's our mood? So I don't know if this is a very happy scene, if it's if this is a scary space, a warm space, a romantic space, a comedic space. We need to start to feel that a little more with the colors, with the light, with the story that we're going to tell. And so that I think could be a little bit stronger, because right now it feels almost like an architectural rendering. And when we're doing an animation, what animation companies are gonna look for in your reel are images that tell a story. So I would recommend developing a backstory in your head, finding reference images. We talk about reference images a lot. Finding reference to demonstrate the mood that you're trying to set, and then try and portray that in your image here. In terms of visual shaping, this is a very, very difficult scene because you can see things like you've got a lot of flat walls here. But what we want to do is we want to create some sort of shaping going down the wall here. We want to, like it's kind of hard to read that this is a little notch in the fireplace here. So we want to make sure that we're reading this curvature with a more variety of light to dark values. We want to get the shaping in there. We want to create a feeling of that curvature. And then for directing the viewer's eye, I'm not 100% certain. Again, this goes back to the story and the mood a little bit, but I'm not 100% certain as the viewer of this what my eye should be focusing on. So generally speaking, your eye jumps to the brightest part of the image, which in this case is like out this window. And it's not always the brightest part of the image. It can be it can be like the most contrasty part. The easiest way to test it is to take your image. Not this one. Is to take your image and just blur it and see what you look at first. Not quite that much. So like here, you would say, okay, cool. Like that is the part of the image that I'm going to be focusing on because my eye naturally is going to be drawn there. Another way to do it is you squint at your image. When I was in photo school, you squinted a lot. So I would say with this one, some more specifics with this one is just, there are a few things that I would have you focus on other than just those three core fundamentals of lighting. Number one is the balance between interior and exterior light. This is something that I like to talk about a lot. So the strength of the sun outside of this window is going to far outweigh the strength of this interior lamp. I think this is an interior lamp here. And like I said, we like to use reference. So when you're exposing for these interior spaces, you can see outside these windows are just blown out white. There's really not a lot that you're going to see out there. Even when you do, like there's another one, just completely obliterated because the exposure of a camera for the interior space is going to be way too bright for the outside. And if you expose for the outside, the inside would look very dark. This can be a little bit tricked in architectural photography because they'll take multiple exposures and kind of piece the image together. But I think for something like this, it would service you much better if this outside space here was like much brighter. So image exposure, we'll just gamma, gamma, and then expose it very bright, and then oh, that's why. Sorry, my computer was being funny there for a second. Or I was being funny, I should say. So, normally it would be like a very bright value that would be very blown out. And then you can kind of, and it would be, judging from the reference, the edge of it would be blurred up a little bit. And just, again, very rough approximations here. And then what I would do is, it seems also like there's a lot of focus on these photographs in the space. So I would want to draw attention from this window down into these spaces. So like I would focus the light and have the pool of light hit maybe around here, and then allow that to kind of tell the story. And then I would tone down this whole area off to the right so that it doesn't, so that we can really focus in on the area that matters, the area where the story is going to be. And then there are things like we could get some more contact shadows underneath here. This dark value of the legs of the table is a little bit too dark. There's not enough variation in shaping. Again, we'll get some shaping up in here. But I think it's just a matter of like how we want to approach this more than the specific light placements of this scene. You know, it would be like, let's set the mood, let's gather reference, and then let's try and match that reference by creating one light at a time as we start to build up the space. In this fruit bowl one, it's very similar. You know, like obviously you've got some good lighting going on, you got some good specular values, but some one of the things that I notice with things like this is there's just not a lot of indirect illumination. You know, like light that would come down here and bounce up into this orange. Like it feels very dark underneath it here. Same thing here. These grapes don't feel translucent enough. They don't feel like there's a like a backscatter or light kind of shining through them. This apple seems very even as we go across here. Like I would really like to see some more shaping. You know, if you look at it looks like you have some reference here in the upper right. Like check out how much the light versus dark values, especially on the bowl itself. Like look at how it's hitting up the rims of the bowl and on this cloth, and like there's little patches of light here. We're not hitting those same edges. There's not the same amount of like light sweeping in from one side. You know, this background, the light's pretty similar and consistent across it in its entirety. And then one other thing about it too is that we want to add some sort of visual softness, like I said, like a diffusion, like a glow, like a final polish over things. So, you know, something else that I'll talk about again in the TDU classes is just adding like a little bit of a Gaussian softness over the top of these, like especially if you're trying to make this look more painterly. I'll screen that over the top. It's a little bit too much, but you can see now we can start to kind of blend some of these elements together, and they start to fall into place a little bit more where they're not quite such a stark difference between the two. That the colors are starting to bleed together, and there's a little bit of diffusion, almost like there's a little bit of Vaseline on the lens there. So yeah, so if you have any questions about that, let me know. Like I said, I think you're an ideal candidate for TDU. I think you're in the right spot. You're exactly where I was 12 years ago, I guess. And it's scary and it's hard, and you're not really sure where to go or where to turn. Like I said, I sunk too much money into graduate school, and it was great for me and it got me to where I needed to be, but it also left me in debt for a long time. So that's why Jasmine and I started TDU, is that we wanted to help people. And even with the school that I had, I didn't learn the stuff that I talked about today. We never understood the whys of lighting. It was all about the hows. And so that's why Jasmine and I started TDU, is that we just want to help people, and we want to help people get over that hump. And because there's a lot of people that I know from that time period who left the industry to go do other things because they never had the guidance and never built the confidence to be able to do this at the level they needed to. In terms of job stuff, yeah, keep plugging away at it. It's hard. It's getting your first job is the hardest one to get. Render Wrangler's good. Really just anything so you can keep food on the table, so you can keep building up your reel and keep applying and keep going. I think I applied, oh man, it had to be not, I used to have the number. It was like 104 jobs before I finally got my first one. So I would say persistence, having a short memory is a great attribute to have, and just keep grinding away at it. So like I said, you know, we'll be here. If you have questions, you have my email address, Mike@TDU. Feel free to reach out to me whenever with questions, and we'll keep going from there. So keep plugging away, Cristina. You got this, and we'll see you soon.